the air with this huge story out of Russia. The man who launched an attempted coup against Vladimir Putin, apparently on a plane that straight up fell out of the sky. The video is nuts, but here's the big question. Was Yevgeny Prigozhin actually on that plane? What we know about this late-breaking story tonight. Also happening in just the last hour, Rudy Giuliani speaking just seconds after his arrest. We are just getting his mugshot in, by the way, as former President Trump gets ready for his own surrender in Georgia and manages to stay center stage at tonight's Republican debate. We're live in Milwaukee and Georgia. Then, in our American Dream series, how budget cuts are closing schools and shuffling up thousands of kids in the middle of some of their most important classroom days. Plus, some wild video out of Texas. A woman barely getting out alive after somebody chucked a spear through the windshield of her car. What police are doing now to try to find the person who did this. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with a stunning new development overseas. The mercenary leader who marched on Moscow in an apparent coup may be dead in a fiery plane crash. With so many questions tonight about what happened and who's behind it, NBC News has obtained video, you can see it here, of what appears to be a plane falling from the sky. So that's that black spot just plunging out of the clouds there. And then this huge plume of smoke after this jet crashes near a village north of Moscow. It was a flight from Moscow to St. Petersburg. And on the passenger list, according to Russian media, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the powerful head of the Wagner group, whose fighters have been trying to take out Ukrainians in that war. State media reporting in just the last few seconds that remains of all 10 bodies on board have apparently been recovered from the crash site. So this is why people think perhaps Prigozhin has been killed, although NBC News has not been able to independently confirm that. And that is a big and important caveat here, because what we're hearing so far, everything so far, comes from the Russians. You've got to take it with a grain of salt, especially because there is no confirmation from the U.S. about really anything in an extraordinary sequence of events that President Biden has been briefed on and has been asked about by reporters. Listen.
I don't know for a fact what happened, but I am not surprised.
Do you believe Putin is behind this, sir?
There's not much that happens in Russia not behind it. I don't know enough to know the answer.
So let's be transparent about what we also do not know. Why did this plane crash? Was it shot down? Was there some kind of catastrophic failure? What was Prigozhin doing in Moscow in the first place? He was supposed to be exiled to Belarus or somewhere else after that march on Moscow. Is he dead or alive? That is the central question here. Was Putin involved? That's something you heard President Biden allude to. And importantly, what happens to the Wagner group now? They operate not just in Russia and in Ukraine, but in other key spots around the world. We've got team coverage tonight from every angle with Josh Letterman live for us overseas, Andrea Mitchell here in Washington. Josh, let me start with you. So many developments. Everything is moving quickly. Bring us up to speed.
Well, what we know so far, Hallie, according to Russian state media who spoke to emergency services there in Russia, is that this plane, a business jet, Embraer jet, took off from Moscow, and about 30 minutes later, it apparently crashed. And flight tracking data that NBC News and other news organizations have been able to see does corroborate that this plane heading to St. Petersburg crashed. Why exactly it crashed? Unclear, but there has been a passenger manifest list published by the Russian authorities for that lists 10 passengers who were on board this flight, including Yevgeny Prigozhin. And now, as you mentioned, authorities saying they have identified 10 bodies from this flight, that all 10 people who were on board this flight are dead. Now, whether Prigozhin actually boarded that flight, was one of those 10 people who were on board, and is now dead, all signs point to that being the case. But until that is 100% corroborated, there's going to be a lot of skepticism, because, as you point out, the story of Yevgeny Prigozhin has changed multiple times in surprising ways over the past few months. And so there's a lot of speculation that what it appears to be may not actually be the case. But certainly, if he is now dead, it is going to prompt a lot of speculation that this may have been payback by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who saw Yevgeny Prigozhin criticized the Russian military over and over for its conduct in the war, and then, of course, mount that attempted mutiny 2 months ago to the day that was really humiliating for President Putin and his leadership. Either way, if Prigozhin is indeed dead, this is a massive and tumultuous event for Russian politics, Hallie.
There's also these reports of maybe a second plane that landed safely. There was some confusion around that.
Yeah.
Have we gotten any clarity? How does that play into this?
So we had been hearing particularly from Wagner-linked Telegram groups. And remember, Telegram is one of the main ways information flows, not always accurate, but information flows in Russia, saying that there was a second plane also owned by Prigozhin and Wagner Group that was in the air and that he may have been on it. Now, he is known to try to protect his whereabouts and his security. He has been reported to use body doubles in the past. And so there were some Wagner-linked groups saying, hold on before you make any assumptions. He may still be alive. In the last few hours, we've heard nothing more about that second plane. And in fact, one of those Telegram groups that is closely linked with the Wagner Group is now saying that they have confirmed that he is in fact dead, Hallie.
Josh Letterman, thank you so much. I know we'll be checking back in with you throughout the night as we get more developments on this. Andrea Mitchell is watching all of it in the geo-diplomatic arena, if you will, Andrea, because from the second that Prigozhin marched on Moscow and then called off that march, there had been speculation from almost that moment that perhaps his life would be in danger now, given the way that Vladimir Putin has sought to seek revenge on his perceived enemies here. Where are things tonight from officials in Washington and around the world?
Well, a lot of confusion, a lot of speculation. I'm really struck by what President Biden said, coming out of all places, a Pilates studio out near Lake Tahoe, where he's vacationing. And he was trying to be very circumspect, but then he said, I'm not surprised. And that is telling, because people throughout the government this afternoon saying, I wouldn't be surprised. They don't have facts. They don't know. I mean, you've been very careful in your setup to say we don't know what really happened here. But, Hallie, we had Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, saying that at the Aspen Security Forum on camera, that when asked about Prigozhin and what would happen to him and whether this détente would last, last month he said, well, Putin is the, apostle of revenge, and that he believes, that revenge is served cold. The exact quotes, but the same forum. I asked Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, about that, about what would happen to Prigozhin, and he said, well, NATO has an open door policy. Russia has an open windows policy because of the Russian diplomats, one actually in Washington, D.C., diplomats, former spies, whoever, who ended up, falling mysteriously out of third and fourth floor windows. So no one is surprised if it is Putin or someone else in the Kremlin. This, according to Mike McCall, might not be Putin. It might have been somebody else. But the fact is, I was told by very high-ranking officials just a couple of weeks ago that he's mostly in St. Petersburg, that he was briefly in Belarus, but he was never exiled, really, and that he's mostly in his home base of St. Petersburg. He showed up, just a few weeks ago at that African summit with Putin, and presumably they were on better terms. But it would not be surprising if this really was the revenge. The only surprising thing is that he's very popular in Russia because of his past, the things that he has done in the past for Putin. And because of that popularity, somewhat surprising that they would do it if they were going to do it over Russian airspace in broad view of everyone.
Andrea Mitchell, I know that you are working the phones, working your emails tonight. Keep us posted, and I know we'll talk again. Thank you. Back here at home on the campaign trail, we are just hours away from the very first Republican primary debate, the highest profile moment yet for the 8 candidates you're about to see, all of them trying to grab some slice of the spotlight to steer attention away from somebody who will not be on stage. The former president and current GOP frontrunner, Donald Trump. He's going to counter-program with an interview with Tucker Carlson instead. So here's your viewer's guide of what to watch for tonight. Number 1. How much will Mr. Trump's rivals go after him or not? Chris Christie, he's going to lean into the attacks. Same for Asa Hutchinson. But what about some of the others looking to take down the clear leader? And on the other end of the spectrum, you have candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy expected to hug Mr. Trump. Speaking of Ramaswamy, that's our middle section here. How will he and Ron DeSantis handle the attacks they'll probably face tonight? With Mr. Trump off the stage, DeSantis now takes the pole position, might make him a target. His team says they're fully prepared, and Ramaswamy is surging. Some opponents are already previewing plans to go after him, although you just saw it here. True to form, Ramaswamy's keeping it loose. He's posting a shirtless tennis video, calling it debate prep. Number 3, how will all the other candidates, the ones you see on the right side of the screen there, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Mike Pence, how will they try to make a name for themselves, to drive fundraising and to raise their profiles? We're also just learning in the last couple of minutes, you know who will be on the debate stage? Doug Burgum. He tore his Achilles playing basketball. There's been a question all day. Is he gonna? Is he not? I guess he's gonna now. Hallie Vitale is also going to be there. She is already there on the ground for us live in Milwaukee. So listen, that's kind of the viewer's guide, right? The Trump factor, the target factor for the non-Trump candidates, and then any breakout moments for these candidates who are polling at lower numbers, who frankly need a big moment to try to make it to the next debate when it gets even tougher to qualify.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Though some of those candidates who you're calling long shots are downplaying the stakes for tonight. Senator Tim Scott's campaign, for example, telling me that this is not a make or break moment for him. They think that the millions of dollars that he has in the bank allow him to continue on past tonight regardless. That's probably true, especially because part of Scott's polling bump is coming from the fact that he's been on the airwaves with millions in ads for months. That's something that most of these campaigns haven't even begun to think about, let alone do. That does give him an advantage, though. For someone like Doug Burgum, the North Dakota governor, this was a moment where making the stage was crucial, and it wasn't a given the fact that that this morning during a basketball game, pickup basketball game with his staff, he got sent to the ER for an Achilles injury. Just in the last few minutes, I was able to report that he will be on the stage tonight. He was very passionate about this just about 2 hours ago when we spoke with him in the spin room. Listen to what he said as we spoke to him before he knew he could compete. What if the doctor says, hey, you can't?
Well, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it, but I'll take it as a suggestion as opposed to an order. I grew up in a place where neighbors help neighbors, and we call that the best of America, and I don't want to let them know.
So you saw the passion there, Hallie. Thankfully for Burgum, he doesn't have to go against doctor's orders. They want to see him again tomorrow, so he'll be back for a checkup and some more scans. But at least he's got the doctor's blessing to stand on the stage tonight, and he will be standing. He said those podiums were sturdy, and he was willing to balance on it. But I do think that there was something striking in that interview. I said, you seem very passionate about being up here. What does it tell you that you would do anything? Stand on one leg to give your message to the American people. And the former president and frontrunner is saying, nah, I'm going to skip out. He completely dodged, did not engage. And I think it's a reminder that even though they all should be going at the frontrunner, they're probably all going to be vying for second place.
Well, and that gets us to the idea, two people that I'm going to be watching really closely tonight, Hallie, and that's Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy. Ron DeSantis, we could have said 6 months ago we'd be watching him in the first debate, right? Because the expectation was he was going to run. I think there was some general narrative that maybe he'd be doing a little bit better than he's doing right now. I think his team would want him to be doing and polling a little better than he is right now. He's got an opportunity here to be in the pole position on stage with Trump not there, Mr. Trump not there. The other person is Vivek Ramaswamy, who, Hallie, I don't know if 6 weeks ago we would have said that he's the one we'd be watching on stage, but you are already seeing opponents try to preview attacks against him. I've talked with one source close to his campaign who says he's done hardly any prep. It's like a very, frankly, like aggressive public no prep strategy, because he thinks, and he said this to our colleague John Allen, that he does better when he's not scripted. He does better keeping it loose. Ron DeSantis, a little bit of a different vibe, right? I mean, this is going to be interesting, the way that people like Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott try to triangulate around each other.
Yeah, sure. Someone like Vivek thinks that he's doing better by keeping it loose. Okay, guess we'll see. For someone like DeSantis, though, I've watched him debate in the first primary that he was in back in 2018 in Florida, then again in 2022 against Charlie Crist. He's someone who might come out with a soundbite, but he also does look agitated when people go at him. And I think that's the goal for a lot of folks that have been watching game tape who are rivals to DeSantis, is to just keep needling him. And I think the thing that makes DeSantis in an even more precarious position tonight is the fact that the polling doesn't look how they wanted it to. He's coming here off of some stumbles and shakeups in his campaign, but also he's going to be taking incoming from everyone on the stage, but also the guy who's off of it, Donald Trump, who's made no bones about the fact that he doesn't love that DeSantis is creeping up in second and that he challenged him at all.
Hallie Vitale, lots to watch for tonight in Milwaukee. We will be seeing you, I know, throughout the evening here on our special coverage post-debate right here on NBC News Now. Thanks, Hallie. Mr. Trump, meanwhile, is getting ready for his primetime arrest tomorrow on charges that he and 18 others worked together to illegally overturn his 2020 election loss in Georgia. So while Mr. Trump hasn't surrendered just yet, plenty of others have, including the latest, Rudy Giuliani here, the former president's former attorney. It was a scene. Look at this in just the last hour or so. He was like full-on swarmed by reporters after he surrendered. He was arguing here that he and others have a First Amendment right to believe an election is stolen and taking a shot at President Biden.
People have a right to believe that in America. Biden and the Biden state doesn't have a right to tell you what the truth is.
We'll say it again. There's no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election that Donald Trump lost. In legit the last maybe 15 minutes, we now have the mugshots of 9 of the people who turned themselves in, including ones from just the last couple of hours. You see Giuliani there down along the bottom. He's one of the people in the middle, along with Sidney Powell. That's Jenna Ellis on the right as well. I want to bring in Blaine Alexander, who has been following all of it, like physically, literally, etc. We heard a lot from Rudy Giuliani, including Blaine, that he says he and Mr. Trump spoke today. I found that interesting because they're not supposed to talk about the case. We don't know what they talked about, right? They can talk about other things, but not about the charges that are facing both of them now in Georgia.
And that was one of the biggest questions that I had, knowing that Rudy Giuliani was going to come to Georgia. Has he spoken to the former president? So, yeah, the fact that he says yes and that they spoke today was certainly fascinating to me. A couple of other things I thought were interesting. One, well, he continued to attack the DA, calling it slamming her investigation on a number of levels, but also saying that he is indicted because he's a lawyer. So what we heard from him throughout this entire time was a very defiant tone. It kind of echoes what he said in New York before he came down here to surrender earlier today. And it also, really echoes what he said all along. So you saw him talking to reporters in that, yes, absolutely a scrum. But it's certainly interesting that he continues to stand behind the former president, says that they've talked and that he wishes him well, Hallie.
You also caught up with Giuliani's attorneys today. They met with some prosecutors. Where does this go for him?
Yeah, they were inside for the better part of 2 hours, Hallie. We saw them go in, and then there was another media scrum as they came out, and we kind of followed them across the street to their cars. I asked, what did that conversation entail? What was their message for the DA? Remember, this is the first time that they're meeting face-to-face with the DA's team since that indictment was handed up. So I asked, what was the conversation like? What did they have to say? Here's what one of them told me. Take a look.
No message for the DA. We spoke with their representatives. They were very professional, and they were helpful in terms of expediting the process to make sure it was done in a safe and efficient manner.
So very complimentary of the meeting with the DA today, or the DA's team. Hallie, again, it took nearly 2 hours before we saw the consent bond agreement.
We just showed those mugshots that we're just getting in the last couple of minutes. Blaine, we talked about Giuliani and Powell and Ellis, some of the quote-unquote bigger names in this case. There are others like David Schaefer, Kathy Latham, who turned themselves in kind of overnight, right? Like in the wee hours. Very different vibe and scene from what we saw from Giuliani, middle of the afternoon, walking in under a big sign that said Fulton County Jail, or Rice Jail, I should say. And Donald Trump, who tomorrow night, Blaine, the expectation is, based on the reporting here at NBC News, will be surrendering probably right in the primetime hours when people are paying attention.
Yeah, we know that it's going to look very different from what we saw with Giuliani today, of course, because the Secret Service is all over that thing. We don't expect to see a lot of shots of the former president. We expect his motorcade to go in likely through kind of this back or side entrance rather than marching right in the front door. But we certainly don't expect to see the type of scrum. The other question is, what is it going to look like on the inside? We've seen people average about an hour to an hour and a half inside that building. Will the former president stay inside that long? We don't know. Certainly one of the biggest questions we have going into tomorrow, Hallie.
Blaine Alexander, our thanks to you, to your producer Charlie Guile there in Atlanta for us. We'll be talking again, I know, in the days to come. Appreciate it. Nearly 100 million people tonight are baking under what's being called a pretty intense heat dome, which has forced some schools in the Midwest to cancel classes right in their first few days of school. A lot of the classrooms there don't have AC. It's just too hot for a lot of the kids to be outside, so no school for them. Minneapolis, Chicago, actual temperatures are right around 100, but it feels a lot hotter, something like 110, 116 even degrees. It comes at the same time that we're watching Tropical Storm Franklin slam the Dominican Republic and Haiti, making landfall just today. We're learning that the storm has turned deadly, killing one person, dumping a ton of rain in the area and some serious flash flooding, too. This is just the latest in what has been a summer of extreme weather. I don't have to tell you, you've probably been feeling it, the heat, the floods, the fires, you name it. And it comes as even weather seems to have been politicized here, at least as it relates to climate change. We've got some new polling now showing that people are divided among party lines over it. A lot of Democrats say, yeah, it's a major factor, but Republicans don't agree. Maggie Vespa has more from Chicago.
Hey, Hallie, coming to you from an absolutely sweltering Chicago. Basically, the heat index here today, just to give you a real feel effect, expected to clock in around 110 degrees. Last check, it was headed that direction. Temperatures today here around 98 degrees. I know the Midwest is used to heat in the summer, but this is unusual. This is exceptional, enough to close schools in suburban Chicago. One district, Downers Grove, telling kids they cannot come in for today, what was supposed to be the first day of school, because most buildings, they say, don't have AC. So the first day has now been bumped to Friday. Also, Chicago Fire Department saying they have extra ambulances on hand, asking people to stay inside, cancel outdoor activities. Basically, we're coming to you from the one outdoor activity that seems to be going on as planned, and that is today's White Sox game against Seattle. Fans have been coming inside, basically saying they're going to sit in the shade, they're going to try to drink water, or at least some of them say drink something while they're inside that stadium. But everyone here is cognizant of this heat and also cognizant of how severe it's expected to be. 170 cities across this region expected to hit new record highs basically by the end of the weekend. We've been talking to people again here at the stadium, over at Lake Michigan, on the beach, just about how they're kind of enduring this, how muggy, how hot it feels. Take a listen to some of what we heard today.
Yeah, stay hydrated, enjoy the game as much as I can and dip out and get some shade when I need to.
I'm perspiring, but I really don't mind the humidity. So once I get home, I'm in air conditioning.
So again, this is a heat wave that is blanketing a huge swath of the Midwest and also stretching into the South. Basically, close to 100 million Americans from Mobile down to New Orleans under extreme heat alerts today. And again, those heat indexes are really what everybody's worried about, topping out at 120 for those real field temperatures in parts of the Midwest. Is expected to break here the end of the week, basically by Friday, but it's expected to linger in the South into next week. So for a lot of people, it is a long, hot road ahead. Hallie, I'll send it back to you.
Our thanks to Maggie for that. A long, hot road indeed. It is a long road to recovery on Maui, where we are now learning tonight that the number of people missing has spiked from 850 to anywhere between 1,000 and 1,100 people. It's been more than 2 weeks now since that firestorm that destroyed the historic town of Lahaina, on Maui, killing at least 115 people. You have crews still searching the areas that have been just incinerated. They're trying to find the remains of victims and connect them with families who have been waiting to hear from their loved ones. I want to bring in Sam Brock, who's live for us there near Lahaina on Maui. Sam, it is a significant change, frankly, in the wrong direction, right? That the number of people missing, according to officials, has gone up. But there is some context to remember here. There are some logistics involved in this. It doesn't mean necessarily that 1,100 people have been killed in addition to the 100 plus that we already know about, right?
So critical. Hallie, officials could not possibly underscore that point more. It does not mean there's 1,000 to 1,100 people who are in harm's way or who are now additionally deceased in addition to the 115 confirmed death toll. What they're saying right now, it means that any shelter or agency or family can report someone unaccounted for. The problem with that, as the FBI has talked about expanding this search and hearing from more sources, is that in many cases, they are not receiving, Hallie, last names, date of births, which is so crucial, or gender. And so they're looking sometimes for a person with one name and seeing if it cross-references with other lists, which is part of the reason why we've seen this number rise. But still, a lot of folks here were under the impression, as this number went from multiple thousands of people to 1,400 to 850 a few days ago, that that trend downward was going to continue. And now that does not appear to be the case. Another major point here is deepening worry about the fate of children in all of this. The FBI says right now, on that list of 1,000 to 1,100 people, there's not a single person on the list that has a date of birth that would qualify them as a minor. However, we are talking to families and hearing specifically from some loved ones who say that they have children who have died. So some of this does not add up. The FBI told me, special agent in charge, that they're right now working with the Maui school services to see whether or not there are children who are not showing up at school and trying to take it from reverse. But I will also say I spoke, Hallie, with a mother and a granddaughter about their loved one, Donna Gomes, who was the matriarch of their family. And for all these people who are still wondering what happened to their loved ones, they are taking some peace right now in the fact that they have closure. Here's what they told me.
There are other families out there that still don't know, in the rubble, in the ocean, where. So it was kind of like a blessing to me, so to speak, that she was like, here I am. You folks don't need to worry, don't need to look.
Still heart-wrenching, of course, nonetheless, Hallie. And the key here right now is DNA samples. The FBI says they've received about 100 of them. And as we mentioned, there are 1,000-plus people potentially who are unaccounted for right now.
There have been questions about the initial response to those wildfires, and now at least questions raised by conservatives about the federal response to those wildfires, too. I want to play for you something that we've just heard now late today from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Listen.
We still have hundreds of individuals that are missing. I think there's going to have to be a congressional investigation in response to what happened now. How can you lose that many Americans in today's age? And the federal response seems very delayed.
Okay, look, I know that was practically impossible to hear, but that is Kevin McCarthy saying there may need to be a congressional investigation about the response. And I wonder how that syncs or not with what you've heard on the ground from locals, Sam. We know that President Biden obviously was in Maui just this week. The White House has laid out a series of things that the federal administration, the White House, has done to try to help.
I can tell you right now, Hallie, that there are two different things right now that locals are most concerned about. One is the housing crisis, and the federal government certainly would play a role in this. What happens when those FEMA assistance funds run out in a matter of weeks? For those folks who are living in Airbnbs or in hotels, then what? There is an acute crisis when it comes to available housing. So that's one thing. And then in terms of the local response from emergency responders, the fire and police departments, there have been so many questions as to what the communication was like. And we know from them yesterday, there was obviously a breakdown in that 5 to 6 o'clock hour, but we heard that the Emergency Operations Center was working in real time, and they had police officers and firefighters on the ground with PA systems, in the words of the police chief, going and talking through the streets, warning people to leave, going out to their doors when they could, knocking on doors, trying to get them out. And of course, some streets were blocked, but largely they say that was because there were down power lines and imminent threats to their lives that way. So it's a really difficult situation right now to try to dissect from afar. We did hear that the action report, the after action report, I should say, of what happened here might be the longest in the history of Hawaii. And it very well might be. They're going to be looking at all these details, scrubbing them down. But the reality is that law enforcement and fire department officials were working in real time with the information that they had. But no doubt there will be investigations.
Sam Brock, live for us now on Maui. Sam, thank you very much. A new twist tonight in the Gilgo Beach murders, with police now investigating a new claim that the suspect charged in that string of serial killings on Long Island was the last person seen with a woman in South Carolina who went missing 6 years ago. The Sumter County Sheriff's Office tells NBC News somebody just gave them a tip that Julia Ann Bean was last seen with suspected killer Rex Heuermann, possibly connecting him to yet another mysterious case, this time outside Long Island. What happened to her, still not solved. The Sheriff's Office tells our team the investigation went cold, but they are now looking into, obviously, this new allegation. Remember, Heuermann was discharged earlier this summer with 3 counts of first-degree murder. I want to bring in Ron Allen, who's covering this for us. A significant twist here, because it could potentially mean that this suspect is involved with the disappearance of yet another woman in yet another state and years after the other killings, right?
Right. The Gilgo Beach killings happened from as far back perhaps as 1996 to 2011. This happened in 2017 in South Carolina. The other things that connect him potentially and perhaps are that his vehicle was found in South Carolina when he was arrested last July in connection with the 3 cases he's been charged with. He also is believed to own a property there in South Carolina, not far, an hour-and-a-half drive or so from where this woman, Julia Ann Bean, was reported missing. We don't know who reported this connection. There's some reporting out there suggesting it was the woman's daughter who saw a picture of Heuermann and told authorities that this is the person that she saw her mother with last back in 2017. As you know, there's also a case in Las Vegas that the police are looking at that could also be connected to Heuermann, another place where he frequented, we believe, and where he also owned a vacation home or a timeshare or something like that. And, of course, in Long Island, there are at least 6 other cases, sets of remains that police are still trying to solve the murder of. We know that Heuermann has been charged in 3 cases as a prime suspect in a 4th case, and then there are these other 6 cases at least that are still being investigated. So very active investigation going on, not just here, but in a lot of places across the country. Hallie?
Ron Allen, thank you very much. We've got to get to some breaking news tonight. Just as we're coming on the air, we're learning that the suspect in an hours-long standoff and shootout with police in Pittsburgh is now dead, according to officials. I want to show you what the scene looked like here. Local police, state troopers, SWAT on the ground. trying to get control of this situation that's been unfolding for most of the day. Our NBC News affiliate in Pittsburgh reporting hundreds of gunshots fires. Houses nearby, a daycare nearby had to be evacuated. Here's what we know so far. The deputies apparently went to a man's home to serve him an eviction notice when he, I'm quoting here, turned violent and began shooting. Officials say one sergeant was hurt. He fell while trying to avoid getting shot. Emily Aketa is joining us now. It has been a dramatic standoff for hours now, Emily, and it appears to be over. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. We're just learning within the last half hour or so that the suspect in this hours-long standoff that transpired over the course of the day in this Pittsburgh neighborhood is dead. Police confirming just after 5 p.m. the suspect was pronounced dead, and we're learning from our affiliate, Pittsburgh affiliate, WPXI, according to their several sources. His name is William Hardison Sr., and this comes after hours long of a barrage of gunfire. You described it, Hallie, hundreds of shots being sounded off throughout this area, really rattling the area and residents, understandably so. These gunshots firing off, you could hear it interrupt interviews with PIOs, public information officers, with people on the ground there, when people were interviewing witnesses on the ground, people who had just been evacuated from their homes, and it would just be dozens of gunshots rattling off. People understandably scared. There was one man who we heard from through our affiliate who was on the phone with his daughter who had been inside a really close nearby home. So as a result of this hours-long standoff, they had begun evacuating homes in the area. Also, a daycare. Several schools in the area had briefly been placed on lockdown. And this is a busy area in Pittsburgh. There's a nearby hospital. There are homes. There are businesses, as I had described. But now it is coming to an end. The initial eviction notice was attempted to be served before noon, and it just transpired, coming to an end just within the last half hour or so, Hallie.
Emily Aketa with that late-breaking story. Emily, thank you. Coming up here on the show, a lot more to get to, including the CPSC for the first time rolling out some ways to make nursing pillows safer for babies, what parents should know. Plus, India just doing something no other country has done before, getting to the moon's south pole. Why so many people want in on this part of the moon in our 5 things. For the first time tonight, staff at the CPSC putting out some recommendations to make those C-shaped nursing pillows safer. You see some pictures of them there. Remember, an NBC News analysis showed that more than 160 babies have died in incidents involving these pillows since 2007. These new recommendations include making warning labels better, the warning labels that are already on these pillows. There's going to be a firmness requirement, like, in other words, making sure that these pillows have a certain level of firmness to try to prevent the risk of suffocation. And also removing some restraints that could lead caregivers, parents, nannies, etc., to think that it's safe to leave babies unattended with these pillows. These pillows are often used by women to help them position their babies when they're breastfeeding or nursing. But NBC News reporting has shown that these pillows can put babies at risk when they're used for sleep instead, or to prop babies up. Vicki Nguyen is joining us now. Again, it doesn't seem like, from our reporting and analysis here, that when these pillows are used for their intention, right, which is to support a nursing parent, that is an issue. It is more about if they're being propped, if they're trying to sleep. And the CPSC guidelines now an important next step.
Absolutely, Hallie. I'm sure you use these pillows. I know I used these pillows when I had my 3 daughters and never knew about the risks associated with them. But we have long known that the American Association of Pediatrics has recommended anytime you are dealing with a sleeping baby, you got to put them on their back, flat, on a flat surface, without a crib bumper, without any soft toys, no blankets in that crib. And that goes for these nursing pillows as well. They are intended only for babies who are attended to, who are breastfeeding, and babies should never be left alone inside of these pillows. But the thing is, they're soft. They're snuggly. In some cases, the labels actually advise people to use them for tummy time, which is where you prop your baby up on its tummy to help them with their neck strength. But the recommendations from safety experts and doctors is only use these for breastfeeding. We asked the CPSC what kinds of recommendations could be used to help design these pillows to make them safer. And they commissioned a study It was released last year, and it found pillows that are firmer, that have more defined edges, not only discourage parents and caregivers from putting the babies in there to rest or sleep, but that they are safer. And so today's step, this recommendation coming from the staff, is really a historic first step towards making these pillows safer. Take a listen to what Commissioner Rich Trumka had to say about these pillows.
Are the pillows the problem, or is the problem that people aren't using them properly?
No, we're not going to blame the parents who are using these pillows. If a product is sold to you and it looks like it can be used for sleep, it should be safe for sleep. And we want to make sure that things that aren't for sleep don't look like you can lay your baby down in them.
And Hallie, I want you to listen to a mother we spoke to. Her name is Taylor Wells. She lost her baby, Autumn, when she was just 4 months old when daycare workers put her baby face down in one of these pillows. And that baby, according to the death certificate, was found covered in a blanket. Take a listen to what she has to say about safety precautions involving all baby products.
As a country, we have the ability to teach every parent how to properly care for their child. We have the ability to teach our daycare workers and crack down and make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, everybody is educated, everybody is qualified. And I think that's something that we are failing at as a country.
And no matter what you see on social media, Taylor Wells wants to send the message: use products only as they're intended. Follow the instructions to keep your babies safe. Hallie?
Vicki Wynn, thank you so much for that important reporting. For more on this story, be sure to watch Nightly News tonight, 6:30 Eastern. Vicki will have more with Lester. That's wherever you watch your local NBC News. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, new body camera video shows the moment police rescued a woman chained to the floor in a home in Kentucky. Look at this. It's horrific. A neighbor heard screaming and called police, who had to use a ladder to get in and get to her. Police say that police say a 36-year-old man was arrested a couple days later. They think he was holding her. He's facing kidnapping charges now, along with some other charges. Number 2, the FDA wants people to immediately stop using a couple of specific eye drops because they could be contaminated with bacteria or fungus. The brands, Dr. Burns and Light Eyes, the FDA says were not sterile and should never have been deemed safe. Essentially, officials say they don't know anybody who's reported a problem yet. That's the good news, but it does come after some other eye drop brands were recalled earlier this year. Number 3, India, making history today as the first country to land an uncrewed spacecraft near the South Pole of the moon. This is new territory, literally and figuratively, and it's so important because scientists think that all the ice on the South Pole could mean, water for future missions. The successful landing comes just a few days after a Russian craft crashed into the lunar surface. Number 2, officials say 2 oil tankers collided in the Suez Canal. It tied up traffic through that really important waterway overnight. Officials say there was a mechanical problem on one of the ships that got it stuck. Then the second ship slammed into it. Tugboats managed to move them around, and then traffic was unsnarled. Number 5, the CDC out with a warning now for anybody who owns little pet turtles. Don't kiss them. Don't snuggle them for a little bit. They've linked a salmonella outbreak across 11 states to these little turtles. 26 people have gotten sick. 9 people ended up in the hospital. Officials say they're investigating. When we come back here on the show, police in North Carolina say they've arrested a woman for allegedly faking her own murder. How they say she tried to do it later in the local. Plus, a lot of kids are going back to school, but not the ones they're used to. We're looking at why so many of this country's public schools are closing down as part of our American Dream series. Next. To our American Dream series, where we talk about the promise of life, liberty, happiness in this country, and whether we're living up to it. This week, we're getting into schools, August, for tens of millions of kids, meaning, of course, a return to packing backpacks, packing lunches, seeing your bestie in class. But for a lot of kids this year, it also means new schools and not by choice. With fewer kids enrolling in public schools, more and more local neighborhood schools are shutting down, displacing hundreds of kids during some of the most critical years that they need to be in the classroom. And it's only getting worse. NBC News correspondent Noah Pransky has the story.
This breaks my heart. I moved to Indianapolis, a widow, 3 small children. This school is where I made friends. Not just my children, but myself also.
You probably know a mom just like Deshawn Jorman, hustling to get her kids out the door each morning.
Let's look both ways.
Spending hours shuttling them around town, and a mom who loved her kids' school.
This was community. This is not just a building. It's not just a school.
But falling enrollment at Indianapolis district-run schools down 38% over the past decade, and the falling funding that comes along with that led the district to permanently close 6 buildings this summer, including Francis Parker Montessori. The place where Deshawn and her kids used to play, learn, and gather was getting ripped away. It was a loss to their community, not to mention sleep. Deshawn's second and third graders not only now have to go to new schools, but she said the best option to keep them in high-performing programs was to now put them in different schools.
I do have to get up earlier. It's more gas because I have to be in 2 lines, drop-off lines. But gas is high.
Drop-off lines is that the worst part of the morning?
Yeah, now I'm going to have to fight the drop-off line.
Deshawn's got to do it all some mornings, but she's not alone. Public schools in dozens of states are facing a crisis. The Department of Education estimates there are today nearly 2 million fewer students in U.S. public schools than before the pandemic. One of the biggest reasons, America's falling birth rate at its lowest level ever recorded. And fewer students means fewer funds.
If you're trying to operate too many schools, you've taken resources out of your remaining schools to prop up these half-empty ones. And often that means there are not enough resources for extracurriculars, AP classes, and things like that.
But this perfect storm for shutdowns is also fueled by pandemic migration out of big cities and out of public schools, more public dollars going to private, religious, and charter schools, and the drying up of COVID relief money that helped many districts delay the inevitable until now.
We're expecting a lot more school closures in the next year or two as a result of the federal relief money running out.
Which is why some superintendents, like Alicia Johnson in Indianapolis, say they're trying to get ahead of the budgetary cliff with a multi-year plan to consolidate buildings while simultaneously expanding educational offerings.
Change is difficult, and I am not asking, nor do I expect that this is going to be a process that doesn't create situations that families are going to have to do something different. We're trying to do the hard things that need to be done so that we can get to better things for kids and families.
Deshawn is no fan of the plan laid out by the superintendent, but in a way, both women are fighting for the same thing, a brighter future.
I want them to learn. I want them to be, have a level of confidence about themselves. And being in a good program can give you that.
I want to bring in Noah Pransky now. So, Noah, you talked about how COVID relief money from the federal government helped delay some of these closures for school districts. Do they typically rely on federal money to boost their budgets?
Federal money is only a small piece of most schools' budgets. Local money, state money, typically 80 to 90% of a school's budget. What this COVID money did, it provided a short-term piece of stability for a lot of schools that were obviously going through a ton of instability during the pandemic. That money's drying up. September 2024 is when it gets cut off. So a lot of schools are trying to get ahead of that because they know from the pandemic, also just from any time a kid has to switch schools, that is a disruption. Disruptions are bad for education. And as we look forward and we see more schools that are likely going to have to close at the local level, we wanted to highlight this story because at the end of the day, learning is important and reducing disruptions is really important to these educators.
Yeah, that's for sure. Noah Pransky. Noah, thank you.
Sure.
Coming up here on the show, a lot more to get to, including a woman in Texas who says she is lucky to be alive after this. Look at this. Went straight through her windshield. What police are saying about this bizarre attack. Plus, what this third grade teacher allegedly did on the first day of school that got her arrested. It's later on in the local. Stick around. Tonight, police are looking for somebody who apparently threw a spear through a woman's windshield in Texas while she was driving down the highway. Look at this. Here's the spear right in her windshield. It's like lodged in there. The woman says she is thankful to be alive. She has no idea how it happened. It was a totally random attack, and police don't know who did it or why. Here's Stephen Romo with more on this bizarre story.
So yeah, guys, I almost died. Somebody threw a spear through my car tonight.
A woman in San Antonio appearing to narrowly escape death after someone hurled a spear through the windshield of her car. Yep, you heard that right. A spear.
But yeah, went into my steering wheel and everything.
The weapon, a few feet long, launched at Siobhan Canales' car, she says, while she was driving on a highway Sunday night.
Just thought I'd show you all how bad it is.
In a video posted on TikTok, Canales showed the aftermath of what happened, and she spoke with NBC affiliate WOAI.
I didn't feel any pain or anything, but I knew glass exploded. So when I looked at the window, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it? What is it? And then when I realized it was a spear, I was like,
As you might imagine, this is a pretty unusual situation.
We don't see this often. This is not a game. This is not funny.
Authorities arriving on scene to assess the damage.
whoa, look how big that is.
San Antonio police say it's an active investigation with no known suspects. Once they figure out who did it, they say they plan on arresting that person who could face a felony charge. Police calling the spear a, quote, lethal cutting instrument. The spear is strange, but potentially deadly items hitting windshields is not unprecedented. Our affiliate reporting a woman got seriously hurt a couple of years ago when someone dropped a cinder block through her windshield from a highway overpass. After her close encounter with that spear, Canales says she's worried about herself and other drivers.
I'm hoping somebody comes forward because that is so dangerous, and if it's not me, it's going to be somebody else.
Man, you could have died.
I could have died, dude.
It could have just went
right through me, bro.
A dangerous near miss as police still search for the culprit. Stephen Romo, NBC News.
NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Northeast Bureau, the woman accused of shoving and killing a voice coach in New York last year, pleading guilty to first-degree manslaughter today. It's part of a plea deal with prosecutors that'll have her serve 8 years in prison, 5 years of supervision after that. She'll be formally sentenced next week. Out of our Southern Bureau, police have arrested a woman in North Carolina for allegedly faking her own murder. According to the arrest warrant obtained by NBC News, she used an app to hide who she actually was and then sent texts claiming she'd been beaten to death with a tire iron. Police say what she did distracted them from dealing with other real cases. She's facing multiple charges and is set to be in court next month. And out of our Midwest Bureau, a third-grade teacher in Oklahoma getting arrested after police said she was drunk on the first day of school. A breathalyzer test found she was over 3 times the legal limit. Body cam video shows her admitted to drinking on her way to school and then having wine in the cup that she had with her in the school. Police say she was arrested briefly and the school district is doing its own investigation. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. We're coming on the air with that huge story out of Russia. The man who launched an attempted coup against Vladimir Putin, apparently on a plane that straight up fell out of the sky. The video, it is nuts. But the big question here, was Yevgeny Prigozhin actually on that plane? What we know about this late-breaking story and some new details just into us. Also happening in just the last hour, Rudy Giuliani speaking only seconds after his arrest as former President Trump prepares for his own surrender roughly 24 hours from now in Georgia, and manages to stay center stage at tonight's Republican debate. We'll take you live to Milwaukee and to Atlanta. Then, a new twist about the suspect in the Gilgo Beach serial killings. Police now say he could be involved with another case in a different state. What we know about what's happening in South Carolina. Plus, we'll take you live to Hawaii, where officials now say more than 1,000 people are missing, that number going up. As here in Washington, the Speaker of the House says he wants to investigate the president's response to those deadly wildfires. Plus, new details stemming from an NBC News investigation with the top government agency laying out the first ever safety standards for pillows used to help with nursing babies. We'll talk about the next steps later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with that stunning new development overseas. The mercenary leader who marched on Moscow in an apparent coup may be dead in a fiery plane crash, with so many questions tonight about what happened and who's behind it. NBC News has obtained the video, you see it here, of what looks to be a plane falling out of the sky. Do you see that black spot in the clouds? That's it, with a huge plume of smoke after this jet crashes near a village north of Moscow. It was flying from Moscow to St. Petersburg. And on the passenger list, according to Russian media, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the powerful head of the Wagner group, whose fighters have been trying to take out Ukrainians in that war. State media reporting that the remains of all 10 bodies on board have apparently been recovered. That's why people think perhaps Prigozhin was killed. He was on this passenger manifest. But we have to note NBC News has not been able to independently confirm that. That is a big caveat here, because what we are hearing so far, as you look at some other video, comes from the Russians. You got to take it with a grain of salt, especially because there's no confirmation from the U.S. about really anything in this extraordinary sequence of events that President Biden has been briefed on and asked about now by reporters. Listen.
I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised.
Do you believe Putin is behind this, sir?
There's not much that happens when Russia not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
So let's be transparent about what we don't know here. Why did this plane crash? Was it shot down? Was there some kind of catastrophic failure? What was Prigozhin doing in Moscow in the first place? He was initially thought to have been exiled to Belarus or somewhere else after that march on Moscow. Is he dead or alive? That is the central question here. And if he is not alive, was Putin involved? That's something you heard President Biden allude to. Then there's this, importantly. What happens to the Wagner Group now? They operate, remember, not just in Russia, but in some other key spots all around the world. We've got team coverage tonight from every angle. Josh Letterman is live for us overseas. Andrea Mitchell here at home. And Josh, let me start with you. Bring us up to speed on what we've learned in just the last couple hours.
Well, Hallie, you're right to add all of those caveats because there's so much we don't know and, frankly, may never know about what happened today. What we do know is that this plane, this business jet owned by Prigozhin and the Wagner Group, took off from an airport in Moscow, was heading to St. Petersburg, and crashed not that long into the flight. We know, according to Russian state media, that there was a passenger manifest. It had those 10 names on it, who was going to be on board, and that on that list was Yevgeny Prigozhin. And now, just in the last hour or so, we have learned from authorities in Russia that 10 bodies were discovered, all dead at the scene of that plane crash. And so it's easy for the mind to say, OK, connect the dots. He was one of the 10 people supposed to be on board. They found 10 bodies. He must be dead. But we don't have that 100% nailed down yet. And this is Russia, as you point out, where disinformation is in many cases more frequent than accurate information. And so nobody is going to be satisfied that Prigozhin is in fact dead until that is proven 100%. And in fact, earlier in the evening, there were reports from Telegram groups that are connected to the Wagner Group that are associated with Prigozhin saying, not so fast, let's hold on, there's a chance he might be still alive. Now we're seeing one of those very prominent Telegram groups associated with Wagner Group saying he is in fact dead. So that is calling into question this speculation that he might be still alive. But any way that you slice it, this is a massive event in Russian politics that is going to have huge ramifications for President Putin's government and for the situation politically there more broadly for some time to come.
Do we even know what those ramifications could look like yet, Josh?
Well, we don't. On the one hand, it probably is not going to be a surprise to a lot of people if it turns out that President Putin was behind the killing of a person who's assumed to be an arch nemesis. After all, this is a guy who just 2 months ago attempted a mutiny against the Russian government. We know President Putin has a long history in the past of targeting his enemies, and many of them have ended up dead after mysterious occurrences. But certainly it is going to ramp up pressure from the West, and it's also going to create potentially a chilling effect for anyone else in the Russian government, in the Russian military, who might have been considering any kind of a threat to Putin's power in the future.
Josh Letterman, live for us there from London. Josh, thank you. Let me bring in Andrea Mitchell, who is covering it from the diplomatic arena here in Washington. And Andrea, you know, I'm struck by something that the CIA director said not too long ago at a roundtable along the lines of, if I were Yevgeny Prigozhin, I wouldn't fire my food taster, right? Alluding to the idea that Putin may be out for revenge after this attempted coup. Again, as Josh laid out, as we've laid out, we don't know that we can connect those dots just yet, but obviously it is a major moment on the world stage here.
No, absolutely. And I was at that conference in Aspen just last month. And the other thing that he said there, Hallie, was Putin is generally thinks that revenge is a dish served best cold. Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback. So Bill Burns, who is known as the Putin watcher within the U.S. government, actually worldwide, he is the best Western analyst, of Vladimir Putin because he was our ambassador in Moscow. He had studied him for years and years at the State Department, now at the CIA. So he knows him very well. And the other thing that was said at that same conference was Tony Blinken. I was interviewing him and asked about it. And he said, if I were Mr. Prigozhin, I would remain very concerned. NATO has an open door policy. Russia has an open windows policy. He needs to be very focused on that. That was Tony Blinken at the same conference. So when you saw the president just now coming out of that Pilates studio in Lake Tahoe on vacation saying, I wasn't surprised, but not saying that he didn't know exactly what happened. I think it's, as Josh said, we may not know for a while. We may never know exactly what happened. Mike McCall, our former ambassador to Moscow, was saying earlier on our network that it could be that someone else in the Kremlin had done this. But, I mean, most likely it was probably, most analysts think, Vladimir Putin. I've talked to people in various agencies today who think it was Vladimir Putin, that this is just a détente that was not going to last and that he was never really exiled. He felt confident enough to be in Moscow. This flight came from Moscow on his executive jet. They know exactly what jet he flies. And also that he was going to St. Petersburg, where he was with Vladimir Putin just a couple of weeks ago at that Africa summit. So that St. Petersburg was his base. He was not operating his Wagner team in Ukraine any longer, but he still thought that he had the Africa account and could run wherever he wanted to over a continent rich in diamonds and gold and other minerals, uranium, and in fact targeting Niger next because he thought that that was the all but declared coup, a very ripe opportunity for his mercenaries. I think this is a story still to be told, and there's also a question that has been raised by some as to what effect this has on the Russian military, already demoralized, having served horrible casualties, sending in the Wagner group in places they didn't want to go, like Bakhmut, for the really worst of the fighting. Also, bringing in recruits who were hardly trained. They were prisoners. I was once, Hallie knows this story so well, I was once on the calling Paul Whelan's family back here. They hadn't heard from him, their weekly call, and it turned out he was hospitalized, not because he was ill, but because they didn't want him to see the Wagner group in the prison recruiting, taking prisoners as cannon fodder in Ukraine.
Andrea Mitchell, it is an incredible moment, and we're so glad to have you here navigating us through it. Thank you. Let's bring it back here at home to the campaign trail now, where we are just 2-3 hours, not even away from the very first Republican primary debate. This is the highest profile moment yet for these 8 candidates you see here, all trying to grab some slice of the spotlight to steer attention away from somebody who will not be on stage. Former president and current GOP frontrunner Donald Trump, of course. He's going to counter-program with an interview with Tucker Carlson instead. We are just getting a preview of that. We're going to talk about it in a second. Let's lay out your viewer's guide for tonight. Here's what we're watching for, if it's helpful for what you're watching for. First, what's the Trump factor here? How much will his rivals go after him or not? Chris Christie, you know he's going to lean in on the attacks. Asa Hutchinson, same thing. What about everybody else? What about the people trying to hug him instead, like Vivek Ramaswamy? That brings us to the second thing we're looking for, Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis. With Donald Trump out, DeSantis takes the pole position, right, as the next highest polling candidate. He's going to be a target. Ramaswamy already, rivals are previewing that he might be one, too. We have some new reporting on his no prep, debate prep strategy. You can see some of it here, him posting shirtless videos of himself playing tennis. Then there's that third bucket, right? Can somebody who's considered more of a long shot, somebody who's not doing so well in polls, at least right now, steal the show? We're talking about people like Doug Burgum, who we've confirmed will be at the debate, despite his Achilles tear. Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, etc. I want to bring in now somebody who is going to be in Milwaukee for us, posted up tonight, and that is Hallie Vitale. That's our viewer's guide. Let's talk through your viewer's guide, right? Because there's a lot of moving pieces. And as we said, the reason why this matters, it's the first debate. It is a big moment relatively for these candidates who, sure, go to the Iowa State Fair and get some cable coverage of it, right? This is a different ballgame.
It's a different ballgame, and I think they all realize that this is not your standard cattle call where you're in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina. Of course, those voters are important, but this is an opportunity to speak beyond those voters, to get the largest audience that most of them have ever had for their message at a point where in any other campaign, this would be squarely in nice to meet you season. This is introductory period of time. This is a moment where they can raise their name ID, but they're working within a primary where the guy who's leading the pack, the former president Donald Trump, has the highest name recognition of all. And so that might explain why some of them have struggled to gain momentum, because people just don't know who they are. And in a world where Trump tends to suck all the political oxygen out of the room, that could be the saving grace for some of these folks who won't get a moment at his expense, but instead can have a moment of their own, maybe at the expense of someone like Ron DeSantis, who is squarely at the center of the stage because he has long been that long shot second place person. But there are other people who you mentioned, like Tim Scott, Doug Burgum, Nikki Haley. They're all looking for a moment right now, even as some of their campaigns say, nah, this is not make or break. They're trying to downplay.
There's also the counter-programming that's going to be a factor here, Hallie. And in just the last couple of minutes, we are getting in a bit of a preview of this Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump interview that, as NBC News has been reporting, has been previously recorded. It's not happening tonight. It was already taped. Our sources say Tucker Carlson's out in Europe, like he's not with Donald Trump in Bedminster tonight. And I think it's telling that the questions are along the lines. There's a variety of questions, right? Some of it is about, for example, a little bit Jeffrey Epstein. There's this discussion of Mitch McConnell. Right. There's sort of a broader discussion here that's happening. Donald Trump has made a conscious decision not to show up on stage. He is the front runner now, but I wonder what you've heard as you're on the campaign trail about whether he continues to do that, not come to these debates, if that could hurt him with voters.
I know that we say, oh, Trump's not coming and there could be political upside to that. I think that's right. That's one way to read this. But there is also a world in which maybe, and I don't know that the polls bear this out, but I guess we'll see, that maybe voters resent the idea that Trump thinks he can just walk away with this nomination again. The reason I don't know that we're actually going to get there is because you look at our recent poll out of Iowa, the ways that Trump has been able to really remake this party, both in his image and ideology, is really striking, and it's part of why we've seen him be so consistently atop the pack. But yeah, I have a feeling that this Tucker Carlson interview is going to sort of sound like a Trump rally, hitting every single note from the ones you'd expect, like Mike Pence and his rivals, to the ones you wouldn't, like Jeffrey Epstein, apparently.
Hallie Vitale, we'll watch for more from that. Hallie, thank you so much, live for us there in Milwaukee. Appreciate it. Mr. Trump, meanwhile, getting ready for his primetime arrest tomorrow on charges that he and 18 others worked together to illegally overturn his 2020 election loss in Georgia. A lot of them have already turned themselves in, and now Rudy Giuliani, Mr. Trump's ex-attorney, is among them. Look at him, swarmed by reporters not long after his surrender. Just a real scene out there, right? Giuliani argued that he and others have a First Amendment right to say that an election was stolen. And he's taken a shot at President Biden, too.
People have a right to believe that in America. Biden and the Biden state doesn't have a right to tell you what the truth is.
We'll say it again. There is no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election that Donald Trump lost. We also, in just the last little bit, have the mugshots now of 9 people who turned themselves in, including the ones from just the last few hours. Giuliani there on the bottom, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis. Vaughn Hilliard is joining us now live from Atlanta, where we have been watching you, Vaughn, in these scrums as a part of these scenes. Interesting to note that Rudy Giuliani said that he spoke with Mr. Trump today. Now, the conditions of sort of the case in front of them stipulates I don't believe these co-defendants can talk to each other about the case. They can talk to each other about other things, but not specifically about these charges, right?
Right, and Rudy Giuliani did not reveal the contents of his communication with Donald Trump, who will be coming here tomorrow to go through the booking process himself. But it's notable because Rudy Giuliani, there's been some discussion. Would he potentially enter a plea agreement, work with prosecutors, essentially flip on Donald Trump or others? And Rudy Giuliani has made it clear today that he will plead not guilty. He will fight this. He will contest it. And he is quite defiant in his claims that he was in the right in the aftermath of the 2020 election and made no fraudulent statements. Take a listen, Hallie, to my attempts to ask him a little bit more in depth about that. Take a listen.
I do not in any way admit the truth of those allegations. Those allegations are totally false.
You did not contest that you made fraudulent claims about the 2020 election, though, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely wrong, and you're lying, as you often do.
And Hallie, it's important to note that 1 month ago, in an official filing related to a defamation case filed against Rudy Giuliani by Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman, those two Fulton County workers,
Yeah.
and Rudy Giuliani, accused of adding thousands of fraudulent ballots to the vote count here in Georgia. He did not contest that he had made false claims about them and that his fraudulent election claims were false. He chose to not contest that in an official filing, which you just heard him say. It does not mean that he admitted to making false statements, though he is not contesting them. It's some legal jargon here that clearly Rudy Giuliani intends to ultimately make when he is brought to trial.
So, listen, I don't want to get down a rabbit hole on this, but there is an interesting thread to pull on the legal bills that are starting to pile up for some of Mr. Trump's co-defendants here. Our pal Brian Schwartz over at CNBC has reported that Rudy Giuliani's son, Andrew, is now asking the former president for help in getting money for his dad's legal bills. Help us fit that into this kind of complicated picture of how much money this is going to take for these people to defend themselves in this case.
Especially when you're looking at the fact that not only did Rudy Giuliani have the defamation case, he has had these official state charges in Georgia filed against him. He was named as one of those co-conspirators, or not named, but he is one of the co-conspirators in Jack Smith, the special counsel's investigation and the indictment of Donald Trump, which could lead to potential charges, federal charges against Rudy Giuliani. You're talking about years of motions and hearings and expensive legal bills. And Rudy Giuliani, it's not quite clear that Giuliani has a bunch of cash to throw at his own legal defense here. And so far, Donald Trump has not ponied up, and neither has the political entities affiliated with Donald Trump. They have not offered to pay his legal bills here at this point. And so from Brian's reporting, it suggests that his own son has reached out to the former president. And we know that Rudy Giuliani himself made a trip to Mar-a-Lago in April and remains in touch with Donald Trump here. So I think most anybody, unless they are independently wealthy, would need some legal financial help. And clearly Rudy Giuliani is among them.
Well, we just had some video, too, of him walking into a bail bonds office as well that we're showing the audience here. That's Giuliani pulling up and getting ready to head in. There's also, just quickly, Vaughn, this filing in just literally the last couple of minutes related to Mark Meadows that, bottom line, I think means that Meadows, he had this motion denied by a judge. He's going to have to show up by Friday at noon to surrender himself now, right?
Right, by noon on Friday, he as well as Jeffrey Clark, another one of Trump's attorneys, are both going to have to show up by Friday and surrender. Of course, there are a lot of flights to Atlanta, so depending on where both of those men are, there should be a little difficulty in getting here, but they both were attempting to push this off and have their cases be heard at the federal court. That is still a possibility, but in the meanwhile, a judge has ordered that they at least must go as far as surrendering themselves by midday Friday, meaning they have about 36 hours to do just that.
Vaughn Hilliard, live for us on the ground, as we will be seeing you for the next 72 hours. Vaughn, thank you. Nearly 100 million people tonight are baking under what's being called a pretty intense heat dome that has forced some schools in the Midwest to cancel classes. Classes are called off right in the first week of back-to-school season. It's because a lot of these classrooms don't have AC there, and it's just too hot for some of these kids to be outside. Temperatures in Minneapolis and Chicago are officially hovering right around 100, but it feels hotter than that, 113, 116. It's all coming at the same time that we're watching Tropical Storm Franklin slam the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It's making landfall today. We're just learning that storm has turned deadly, killing one person as it dumped a ton of rain onto the island, bringing with it some serious flash flooding. It's just the latest in what has been a summer of extreme weather. I don't have to tell you, you've been living it, just like we have. Fires, flooding, heat, etc. But some new polling shows a divide over how people perceive the impact of climate change. It probably depends on how you vote. Many Democrats say, yeah, it's a major factor. Republicans don't agree. Maggie Vespa has more for us live from Chicago. This heat dome, Maggie, it is intense, and it is having an impact now on the back-to-school season.
Yeah, Hallie, it is. You know, here in the Chicago area, we have several districts like the ones that you talked about across the Midwest, really. But here specifically, one, Downers Grove, which is a suburb just west of Chicago, they were supposed to have their first day of classes today. The entire district canceled, saying a lot of their buildings don't have AC, and it's just not safe. Even in the Midwest, where summers definitely get hot, this is extreme. A lot of people, as you can imagine, coming out here, flocking to Lake Michigan, diving in to get cool. And then we saw people just kind of, you know, living by those good good old-fashioned golden rules when it comes to extreme heat. Here's some of what people said they're doing just to stay cool in this record heat wave. Take a listen.
Yeah, stay hydrated, you know, enjoy the game as much as I can and dip out and get some shade when I need to.
I'm perspiring, but I really don't mind the humidity. So once I get home, I'm in air conditioning.
Yeah, going home to the air conditioning is good. I should point out, specific to that first guy, the one event that we could kind of find that was going on as planned, especially outside, was the White Sox game against Seattle. It started at 1:10 today. It was a home game here in Chicago. People pouring into the stadium said they were basically getting in early, a lot of them to make sure they got seats in the shade. And then a lot of them said they planned to make sure they got plenty of beverages. We hope that was water. Regardless, a lot of people here in Chicago just noticing how extreme this is. And, you know, we hear from people a lot. It gets hot during the summer. It's hot in summer. Why is that news? Think about this. Across the Midwest and across the South, by the end of the weekend, 170 cities expected to hit new record highs in this heat wave, Hallie. So this is undoubtedly extreme, just going by the numbers.
Maggie, you're preaching to the choir here. We say it all the time in the winter. It's cold, it's snowy, it happens. In the summer, it gets hot. Not like this. This is extraordinary. It's unusual.
Exactly.
That's why you're out there standing in it. Please go hydrate yourself, Maggie, however you choose to do so. Appreciate it. Let's take you to Maui now, where we're now learning tonight that the number of people missing has spiked from 850 to above 1,000, maybe 1,000 or 1,100 people, according to officials there. It's been 2+ weeks since that firestorm destroyed the historic town of Lahaina. It just obliterated it, incinerated it. 115 people confirmed dead, and that number is likely to go up. Crews are still looking in some of the places that have been burned. They're trying to find remains and connect back to the families of people who have loved ones that they cannot get in touch with. Sam Brock is live for us on Maui. And Sam, you know, I think that people, your heart sinks when you hear that the number of people missing has gone up, right? That this list has gone from like 850 to maybe 1,100 people. It's important to note it doesn't necessarily mean that all 1,100 people have been killed in this fire, right? Explain that.
That is the most important thing to emphasize right now, Hallie. And before we get into some of the context, let me explain that you've covered enough natural disasters to know that when you're talking about hurricane aftermath or fire aftermath, building collapses, typically you start with a big number when it comes to those who are unaccounted for, and that gets whittled down largely because the telecommunications come back, family members get in touch with law enforcement, there's some duplications. That's typical. This is kind of the reverse of that situation where you had 850 declared unaccounted for as of 2 or 3 days ago, and now it's at 1,000 to 1,100. What happened here? I did speak with the FBI. They said part of this is just a function of them expanding their search, collecting more information, hearing from more sources. Part of the problem is a lot of the people that are reporting people missing, or unaccounted for, I should say, are not providing anything other than a first name in some cases, or a last name, but no date of birth or no gender. So in many of these situations, law enforcement is left with trying to cross-reference who this might be, who this person could be, with only a name. That's part of it. Another thing that kind of surprised us yesterday was an announcement from the FBI that they had no one on this list of 1,000 to 1,100 people with a date of birth that would constitute a minor. Now, when these flames broke out mid-afternoon, kids are out of school, parents presumably are working. There's deep concern right now in the Lahaina community in Kula that there could have been children impacted deeply and perhaps killed in the flames. No indication from that. What the FBI said was they're trying right now to talk with Maui school services to see who is and is not showing up. And at the moment, they have no proof that any minors are involved. We're going to be digging into that. But I did speak with a mother and a daughter who has a grandmother, the patriarch of their family, Donna Gomes. She lost her life in this blaze. She was found, they said, just feet from her home. But they feel, in a sense, closure at least, something that so many other families don't have right now. Take a listen to what she told us.
There are other families out there that still don't know, in the rubble, in the ocean, where. So it was kind of like a blessing to me, so to speak, that she was like, here I am. You folks don't need to worry, don't need to look.
Hallie, part of the problem right now, we talk about that list of 1,000 to 1,100 people. Who is providing DNA samples to try to match whatever the FBI is able to find and what they're able to process in the lab? Because right now we're told the total of family members who have submitted their DNA so far, and it's a simple cheek swab, is about 100. Yeah. So there's obviously a lot more folks they want to see come in to offer some of their DNA.
I was just going to say, huge mismatch, right, on those numbers. They want to see those other numbers, the DNA numbers, people coming in to offer, go up. You also have, Sam, as you well know, even from your time on the ground there, these questions about the initial response locally, and now new questions from conservatives federally about whether the federal government, the Biden administration, did enough. That is coming from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy late today. I want to play for you what he said about the federal response.
We still have hundreds of individuals that are missing. I think there's going to have to be a congressional investigation in response of what now can be out.
So a congressional investigation, he's suggesting. Does that sync with what you're hearing on the ground from people about how the administration, the federal government, as opposed to the state and local government, responded?
Well, there's no doubt frustration. And with the federal government, I mean, you're talking about funding right now that is badly needed for housing, supplies, food, among other things. But I will say, with respect to these hundreds of people still missing and why that would be the federal government's fault, I mean, I'm not really seeing the connection in the sense that, Hallie, part of the problem is there are people who are likely lost at sea. And there are hundreds of members of the Department of Defense and the Navy and the Army that are out here, the Coast Guard, that are combining in this search. But also, just the sheer temperature of this fire was hotter than many crematoriums. So you have vehicles and people that were presumably burned, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to identify them. So I don't know that it's fair to say that because hundreds are still missing, that is a function of the federal government's response. But no doubt, this will be investigated further.
Sam Brock, live for us there on Maui. Sam, thank you. A new twist tonight in the Gilgo Beach serial killings. With the Sumter County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina telling NBC News somebody gave him a tip that a woman from South Carolina was last seen with that suspected serial killer Rex Heuermann, which maybe connects him to yet another mysterious case, this one outside of Long Island. Police are now investigating this new claim. Remember that Heuermann was charged in a string of long unsolved killings of women on Long Island. He apparently now, according to this new allegation, was the last person seen with Julia Ann Bean in South Carolina, who went missing 6 years ago. What happened to her? That is still not solved. The sheriff's office tells our team the investigation went cold, but they're now looking into this new claim. Remember, Heuermann was discharged earlier this summer with 3 counts of first-degree murder. I want to bring in Ron Allen, who's following this one. You know, if the dots end up connected here, it could potentially mean that this serial killing suspect is involved with the disappearance of yet another woman in yet another state and years after the other murders.
Correct, yes. This case in South Carolina dates to 2017. The Gilgo murder cases date back perhaps as far as 1996, and many of the bodies, the remains, were found around 2011. So, yes, and what this is an indication of is the potential scale of what has happened. And it also indicates that it's still a very, very active case and investigation. A lot of cases that may ultimately be linked to Heuermann and perhaps not. As you said, right now he is linked to and charged with murder in 3 cases, and the prime suspect in a 4th here in New York on Long Island. The case in South Carolina involves a woman, and there was someone who came into the Sumter County Police and gave them a tip. It's unclear who that is. There's some speculation out there that it was the missing woman's daughter, who says that she saw a photograph of Heuermann, the suspect in Gilgo Beach, as the last person to be with her mother. We don't know a lot about the circumstances of that disappearance. The other thing that connects Heuermann to South Carolina is that his vehicle, his car, which was connected to him in the murder case in Long Island, was also was recovered from South Carolina when he was arrested in July. There's also a connection because he owns a home there, or his family does. So there are connections to him there in South Carolina, Las Vegas, a number of other places where police are still trying to understand the potential scale of what happened and what he can be connected to or not.
Ron Allen, thank you very much for staying on top of this one. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, a new search tonight at the former home of the BTK serial killer who was convicted of killing 10 people decades ago. Why investigators now think he's the prime suspect in even more unsolved murders. Plus, Olive Garden facing a new lawsuit. I don't want to tell you what one guy says he found in his minestrone, but you probably need to hear it. For the first time today, staff at the CPSC putting in place some new recommendations to make those C-shaped nursing pillows safer. You see some of those pillows here. An NBC News analysis has shown that more than 160 babies have died in incidents involving these pillows since 2007. These new recommendations include making the warning labels already on those pillows better, putting in place a requirement for these pillows to be a certain firmness, essentially, to try to prevent kids from suffocating, and removing any restraints that could lead caregivers, parents, nannies to think that it's safe to leave babies unattended with or on these pillows. NBC News reporting has shown that these pillows can put babies at risk when they're used to sleep or to prop them up. Vicki Nguyen is joining us now. Again, it doesn't seem like, from our reporting and analysis here, that when these pillows are used for their intention, right, which is to support a nursing parent, that is an issue. It is more about if they're being propped, if they're trying to sleep. And the CPSC guidelines now an important next step.
Absolutely, Hallie. I'm sure you use these pillows. I know I used these pillows when I had my 3 daughters and never knew about the risks associated with them. But we have long known that the American Association of Pediatrics has recommended anytime you are dealing with a sleeping baby, you got to put them on their back, flat, on a flat surface, without a crib bumper, without any soft toys, no blankets in that crib. And that goes for these nursing pillows as well. They are intended only for babies who are attended to, who are breastfeeding, and babies should never be left alone inside of these pillows. But the thing is, they're soft. They're snuggly. In some cases, the labels actually advise people to use them for tummy time, which is where you prop your baby up on its tummy to help them with their neck strength. But the recommendations from safety experts and doctors is only use these for breastfeeding. We asked the CPSC what kinds of recommendations could be used to help design these pillows to make them safer. And they commissioned a study. It was released last year, and it found pillows that are firmer, that have more defined edges, not only discourage parents and caregivers from putting the babies in there to rest or sleep, but that they are safer. And so today's step, this recommendation coming from the staff, is really a historic first step towards making these pillows safer. Take a listen to what Commissioner Rich Trumka had to say about these pillows.
Are the pillows the problem, or is the problem that people aren't using them properly?
No, we're not going to blame the parents who are using these pillows. If a product is sold to you and it looks like it can be used for sleep, it should be safe for sleep. And we want to make sure that things that aren't for sleep don't look like you can lay your baby down in them.
And Hallie, I want you to listen to a mother we spoke to. Her name is Taylor Wells. She lost her baby, Autumn, when she was just 4 months old, when daycare workers put her baby face down in one of these pillows. And that baby, according to the death certificate, was found covered in a blanket. Take a listen to what she has to say about safety precautions involving all baby products.
As a country, we have the ability to teach every parent how to properly care for their child. We have the ability to teach our daycare workers and crack down and make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, everybody is educated, everybody is qualified. And I think that's something that we are failing at as a country.
And no matter what you see on social media, Taylor Wells wants to send the message: use products only as they're intended. Follow the instructions to keep your babies safe. Hallie?
Vicki Nguyen, thank you so much for that important reporting. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the suspect in the University of Idaho murders in just the last hour or so has waived his right to a speedy trial. The trial was supposed to start in October, but now it's TBD. Brian Koberger has pleaded not guilty to killing 4 students at an off-campus home last November. Number 2, officials say Dennis Rader, a.k.a. the BTK killer, is the prime suspect in at least 2 more unsolved murders. Investigators searched one of his former properties in Kansas this week in what officials called a potential connection to the disappearance of an Oklahoma woman back in the 70s. Rader is in prison in Kansas. He was convicted of killing 10 people there from the 1970s to 90s. Number 3, India, making history today as the first country to land an uncrewed spacecraft near the South Pole of the moon. This is brand new territory, both literally and figuratively. It's important because scientists think all the ice on the South Pole there could, matter for water for future missions. The successful landing by India, a big deal for them, comes just a few days after a Russian craft crashed right into the moon's surface. Number 4, a Michigan man is suing Olive Garden, alleging he found a rat's foot in some of his minestrone soup. We're about to show you a picture from the complaint. I want to give you a chance to look away if you don't want to see it. You've been warned. Look away now. This is the picture. According to the lawsuit, the guy felt some sort of pain from something in his mouth when he tried to swallow. When he spit it into a napkin, the complaint said he saw a rat foot and then vomited. An Olive Garden spokesperson told NBC News the company has no reason to believe there is any validity to this claim. The CDC is out for a warning for anybody who owns small pet turtles. Maybe don't kiss them or snuggle them for a little bit. That's because a salmonella outbreak has been linked in 7 states to these little guys. 26 people have gotten sick. 9 people ended up in the hospital. Officials say they're investigating. When we come back, August typically means a lot of kids heading back to school, but new numbers show there are 2 million fewer kids in public schools than pre-pandemic. We're talking about why next as part of our American Dream series. Plus, remember that disastrous fire festival 6 years ago? Looks like there's going to be a round 2. Where it's going to happen later in the Global. To our American Dream series now, where we talk about the pledge of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness in this country, and whether we're living up to it. This week, it's all about schools, because you know it is back to school season for tens of millions of kids. Packing their backpacks, packing their lunches, getting back to see their classroom bestie. But for a lot of kids this year, it also means new schools, and not by choice. Enrollment in public schools across the country has been shrinking. More and more local neighborhood schools have been shutting down, meaning that so many kids have been displaced during these really critical learning years. Noah Pransky has more.
This breaks my heart. I moved to Indianapolis, a widow, 3 small children. This school is where I made friends. Not just my children, but myself also.
You probably know a mom just like Deshawn Jorman, hustling to get her kids out the door each morning.
Let's look both ways.
Spending hours shuttling them around town, and a mom who loved her kids' school.
This was community. This is not just a building. It's not just a school.
But falling enrollment at Indianapolis district-run schools down 38% over the past decade, and the falling funding that comes along with that led the district to permanently close 6 buildings this summer, including Francis Parker Montessori. The place where Deshawn and her kids used to play, learn, and gather was getting ripped away. It was a loss to their community, not to mention sleep. Deshawn's 2nd and 3rd graders not only now have to go to new schools, but she said the best option to keep them in high-performing programs was to now put them in different schools.
I do have to get up earlier. It's more gas because I have to be in 2 lines, drop-off lines. But gas is high.
Drop-off lines is that the worst part of the morning?
Yeah, now I'm going to have to fight the drop-off line.
Deshawn's got to do it all some mornings, but she's not alone. Public schools in dozens of states are facing a crisis. The Department of Education estimates there are today nearly 2 million fewer students in U.S. public schools than before the pandemic. One of the biggest reasons, America's falling birth rate at its lowest level ever recorded. And fewer students means fewer funds.
If you're trying to operate too many schools, you've taken resources out of your remaining schools to prop up these half-empty ones. And often that means there are not enough resources for extracurriculars, AP classes, and things like that.
But this perfect storm for shutdowns is also fueled by pandemic migration out of big cities and out of public schools, more public dollars going to private, religious, and charter schools, and the drying up of COVID relief money that helped many districts delay the inevitable until now.
We're expecting a lot more school closures in the next year or 2 as a result of the federal relief money running out.
Which is why some superintendents, like Alicia Johnson in Indianapolis, say they're trying to get ahead of the budgetary cliff with a multi-year plan to consolidate buildings while simultaneously expanding educational offerings.
Change is difficult, and I am not asking, nor do I expect that this is going to be a process that doesn't create situations that families are going to have to do something different. We're trying to do the hard things that need to be done so that we can get to better things for kids and families.
Deshawn is no fan of the plan laid out by the superintendent, but in a way, both women are fighting for the same thing, a brighter future.
I want them to learn. I want them to be, have a level of confidence about themselves. And being in a good program can give you that.
Noah Pransky is joining us now. Noah, thank you for bringing us that. There's so much to this, and I wonder if anything in the course of your reporting surprised you as you were working on this piece.
I mean, the fact that you can look at the same thing through two different lenses shouldn't really be a surprise in today's culture. But, you know, mom wants the best thing for her kids. The school superintendent wants the best thing for their 31,000 students. And at the end of the day, something has to give. When this federal money dries up, the money that was there to really stabilize a system that was shrinking and shrinking just isn't there anymore. And the superintendent says she has to make some difficult decisions. And unfortunately, some kids who are just coming out of this pandemic disruption are going to face new disruptions. And that's why we wanted to highlight this story.
Noah, thank you. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, a super random and unusual attack in Texas after a spear was thrown through somebody's windshield. Look at that, right into the steering column. Think how close that came to her. How police are trying to find whoever did this. Plus, why a jet skier is being investigated in South Korea in the Global. Police tonight looking for somebody who apparently threw a spear through a woman's windshield in Texas while she was driving down the highway. Look at this. Here's the spear in her window. It ended up like right in her steering column. She says she is so thankful to be alive, but has no idea how it happened. It was a random attack, and police don't know who did it. That's what they're trying to find out. Stephen Romo has more.
So, yeah, guys, I almost died. Somebody threw a spear through my car tonight.
A woman in San Antonio appearing to narrowly escape death after someone hurled a spear through the windshield of her car. Yep, you heard that right. A spear.
But yeah, went into my steering wheel and everything.
The weapon, a few feet long, launched at Siobhan Canales' car, she says, while she was driving on a highway Sunday night.
Just thought I'd show you all how bad it is.
In a video posted on TikTok, Canales showed the aftermath of what happened, and she spoke with NBC affiliate WOAI.
I didn't feel any pain or anything, but I knew glass exploded. So when I looked at the window, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it? What is it? And then when I realized it was a spear, I was like,
as you might imagine, this is a pretty unusual situation.
We don't see this often. This is not a game. This is not funny.
Authorities arriving on scene to assess the damage.
Whoa, look how big that is.
San Antonio police say it's an active investigation with no known suspects. Once they figure out who did it, they say they plan on arresting that person who could face a felony charge. Police calling the spear a, quote, lethal cutting instrument. The spear is strange, but potentially deadly items hitting windshields is not unprecedented. Our affiliate reporting a woman got seriously hurt a couple of years ago when someone dropped a cinder block through her windshield from a highway overpass. After her close encounter with that spear, Canales says she's worried about herself and other drivers.
I'm hoping somebody comes forward because that is so dangerous, and if it's not me, it's going to be somebody else.
Man, you could have died.
I could have died, dude.
It could have just went
right through me, bro.
A dangerous near miss as police still search for the culprit. Stephen Romo, NBC News.
NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our foreign desk has done it for you. Here is some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Mexico, at least 16 people have been killed, dozens more hurt after a bus carrying migrants crashed into a freight truck. Mexican officials say some of the people on the bus had appointments to apply for asylum at the U.S. border. We don't know yet what caused the crash. Out of South Korea, the Coast Guard says they think a Chinese man who's been detained there since he tried to illegally enter the country on a jet ski is a Chinese dissident who feared for his safety. Officials think he rode this jet ski like 200 miles to try to get into a city right along the coast of South Korea. He's now being investigated for breaking immigration law. From potentially somewhere in the Caribbean, maybe, Fire Festival Round 2, if you can believe it. Remember the now infamous first one back in 2017? The founder is out of jail now, and in a new interview says the festival will come back at the end of next year. When? We don't know. Where? We don't know. Who's going to play it? We don't know. But we do know that according to the festival site, tickets sold out, the first 100 of them, for like $500 each. So that's a thing that has happened. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.